Hello there, cinema lovers!
Welcome to FilmStorm. In today's episode, we are going to analyze The Peasants, the latest adaptation of Władysław Reymont's Nobel-winning novel directed by Hugh and DK Welchman. The film, made in a similar technique as their previous one, Loving Vincent, is a real feast for the senses. It delights with both image and sound. But what about the plot? How are the characters presented? Here's what we think about it.
Przychodzi i odchodzi, a ziemia zostaje.
The action, both in the novel and in the new film adaptation of The Peasants, takes place in a village of Lipce, a unique place that lives beyond historical reality. The everyday life of its inhabitants does not know dates, but it's divided into a cycle of seasons that determines the order of everything. In the film, the seasons pass beautifully one into another, with the best transition, unfortunately unavailable in the promotional materials, between spring and summer, from Stanisław Masłowski's Moonrise to a full sun over a field during harvest. The above-mentioned endless cycle of seasons, eternal deaths and births, shows that the highest, although not the only, power in Lipce is exercised by nature, which is one of the two driving forces and objects of greatest desire around which the main action of both the film and the novel revolves.
The second force and an object of desire is of course Jagna. However, in the film that character is not quite like the one we know from the novel. Instead of being selfish and empty, she becomes a creator of positive energy, willingness to help, and sensitivity to beauty and art. In their adaptation, the Welchmans also highlighted another feature of Jagna, briefly mentioned in Reymont's work, which allowed the main character to be shown from a very interesting symbolic and visual perspective. They combined Jagna and nature into one whole. For centuries, in literature and art, women have been presented as synonymous with nature, mainly due to their similar features, such as prolonging the cycle of life, abundance, fertility, as well as mystery, wildness and danger, as in the case of femme fatale. Throughout the film, Jagna is presented as a reflection of nature, and just like nature, she becomes an object that everyone tries to capture, trap and use for their own ends. On the one hand, just as the cultivated land, which represents colonized, subordinated and commanded nature, Jagna is also ensnared and exploited by both men and women for their selfish purposes. On the other hand, Jagna shows a vivid imagination, a desire for freedom, and in two scenes, like a typical femme fatale or the cruel face of Mother Nature, she mocks Antek and makes fun of him, toys with him, making him understand that she is beyond his naive feelings. The land and Jagna are the objects of greatest desire, and it is about them that arguments break out and all disagreements arise in Lipce. In one of the scenes, Antek lifts covered in mud, earth-colored Jagna from the road as if he was lifting and taking possession of the land itself, while in another scene, Antek directly compares Jagna with nature, uttering the words of one of the novel's narrators. "You are like this holy land to me, that brings everything to life."
Jest dla mnie jak ta ziemia święta. Wszystko do życia budzi.
Jagna, as nature, when she has a moment of respite from the men striving for her and the women trying to control her life, tries to enter into symbiosis with the surrounding nature. She imitates it, creates jewelry from it, and often dresses in harmony with its colors or the weather and seasons. She imitates animals, as in the scene with the stork, or helps them, as in the meaningful scene with the beetle. She also spends a lot of time in nature, usually lying close to the ground, among flowers, or cuddling up to it. The film also creates a framework for this interpretation. At the beginning, we can see Yagna carefree, a part of the surrounding nature, dressed in autumn colors, a true child of nature. In the final scene, we see the camera move from the furrowed, raped earth to the mud-covered, suffering Yagna lying in the fetal position. This approach allows us to better understand what she went through. That is exactly what the wild nature went through before it became someone's farmland, barren and left fallow.
In the new adaptation, Yagna is not only identified with nature and free spirit. More emphasis is also placed on her artistic soul and manual skills, and the fact that, in the opinion of some critics of the film, Yagna is just a child making cutouts is terribly unfair to this character. Well, Yagna is presented in the film as a young woman suppressed by society, sensitive to beauty, who wants to break free from the restrictions of the village. It is beautifully connected to probably the only painting by Józef Chełmoński painted inside the house, entitled Summer Evening. Interestingly, a painting that was considered lost for over 130 years, but that's a different story. Speaking of Yagna as an artistic soul, in the film we can see a mirror image of Summer Evening, and whereas in the painting the open window stretching before the dreamy girl symbolizes artistic creativity, in the film the closed window and Yagna being embraced by her mother, who controls her life and compels her to marriage, symbolize the opposite, the suppression of the girl's artistic abilities.
The suppression of Yagna's artistic abilities has a huge connection with the structure and hierarchy that are characteristic of small communities. Almost every village and small town, where everyone knows each other, has the hallmarks of a panopticon, a circular prison with a guard tower in the middle, where prisoners feel that they are constantly being watched, and which Michel Foucault described as power that is exercised against individuals in the form of continuous individual supervision, in the form of control, punishment, and compensation, in the form of correction, that is, modeling and transformation of units according to specific standards. The village of Lipce is a kind of panopticon in which Yagna, who stands out in particular, is under constant surveillance by the villagers. She has to be twice as careful and adhere to generally accepted norms so that people do not vilify her. There are two scenes in particular which, when combined, look as if they were taken straight from the first chapter of The Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston. Visually beautiful, yet disturbing, they show that the mechanism of a panopticon and the punishment of an outcast is an act close to an archetype, practiced among communities all over the world. The first scene comes from the concept trailer and shows a mob of angry villagers coming for Yagna to punish her. The second scene comes from the released film and shows a procession of masked men, shrove-tide revelers, encircling a house.
The village had also been counting. On the night the baby was to be born, the villagers raided our house. Some were crying. Like a great saw, teeth strung with lights, files of people walked zigzag across our land, tearing the rice. Their lanterns dabbled in the disturbed black water, which drained away through the broken bumps. As the villagers closed in, we could see that some of them, probably men and women we knew well, wore white masks. The people with long hair hanged over their faces. Women with short hair made it stand up on end. Some had tied white bands around their foreheads, arms and legs. At first, they threw mud and rocks at the house. Then they threw eggs and began slaughtering our stock. We could hear the animals scream their deaths. The roosters, the pigs, a last great roar from the ox. Familiar wild heads flared in our night windows. The villagers encircled us. Some of the faces stopped to peer at us, their eyes rushing like searchlights. The hands flattened against the panes, framed heads, and left red prints.
The quote describes a similar situation. Here, a woman who did not conform to the prevailing norms, or simply was raped, is punished by the all-seeing and unforgiving community. Both situations prove that even communities located thousands of kilometers apart follow similar atavistic behaviors.
Not only Jagna, the other main characters are also endowed with certain symbolism. Antek, who dresses up as a wolf in the film, epitomizes some of its features. He is dangerous, often enraged like a wild animal, guided more by instinct than by reason. Interestingly, the film also shows that there are in fact two different wolves in Antek. He undergoes a transformation from the so-called lone wolf, rejected by the pack, that is, the inhabitants of Lipce, whose image is additionally emphasized by including a painting by Alfred Wierusz Kowalski under the obvious title Lone Wolf, to finally turn into an alpha wolf. After his father's death, Antek becomes the first farmer in the village, whose opinion is not to be trifled with.
Antek's wife Hanka, phenomenally played by Sonia Mietilica, also undergoes an interesting transformation. In the film, she is portrayed as a kind of businesswoman of that time, a complete opposite of frivolous Jagna, who doesn't care about her wealth or land. Hanka, whom no one takes seriously at first, over time proves that she has much tougher character than her husband, and that she can take care of the children, the house, the land, and her father-in-law, Boryna, in time of need. Seeing her resourcefulness, the first farmer in Lipce throws everyone except Hanka out of the room and gives her all his savings, thus anointing her as his successor. Hanka's hard work and tirelessness are clearly visible in the scene inspired by the painting titled With Brushwood by Julian Fałat.
To finish off our quartet of main characters, we cannot forget about Maciej Boryna, whom we see very often in the film in scenes with vodka. Vodka in the film has double symbolism. It is a symbol of marriage and has the power to make deals, which also reduces the act of marriage to a simple contract or business deal. The strength of vodka seems to have no effect only on Jagna. The girl refuses to drink it as if it were poison, thus opposing the host. At the wedding, forced to drink it, she grimaces, expresses her disapproval, and finally gives in and succumbs to her husband. Moreover, Boryna, like Hanka, is the epitome of hard work. The scene just before his death, when in his last burst of strength he goes out to the field to sow, defines him best and is distinguished by its similarity to the popular motif of the sower, which often appears in paintings. Boryna is also placed in the center of the frame, usually surrounded by other characters. The attention is directed to him when something important is happening or about to happen. This is visible in the prosaic meal scene, in which Boryna is seated similarly to Caravaggio's Jesus, as well as in the solemn reverent scene of the vigil over his body, in which, like Mantegna's Jesus, he is surrounded by mourners and turned to the audience with his feet, as if we were also surrounding his body together with the other participants of the ceremony. However, the final tribute to Boryna is made by his son Antek, who paints a white cross on the lid of the coffin and reminds us of the poignant tragedy from Aleksander Gierymski's painting Peasant Coffin.
Speaking of the reverence expressed in paintings by famous artists, the new Peasants are a real feast for art lovers, especially the paintings of young Poland. The film is mostly painted in the naturalistic style of Józef Chełmoński. In the film, we can see, among others, storks, which inspire hope, departing cranes, flying majestically, a road in the forest, stretching before us, partridges in the snow, huddling in the cold, phenomenal shots of Indian summer, thunderstorm manifesting fear, autumn gradually turning into winter, cross in the snowdrift, and many others. Among the remaining masters of painting, we can notice, among others, several inspirations drawn from Jean-François Millet, Peter Bruegel the Elder, Ferdynand Ruszczyk, Józef Rapacki, or the previously shown Johannes Vermeer.
The new adaptation of The Peasants is our new national treasure, based on the work of Władysław Reymont, but with its own unique style. It is pointless to compare these works. After all, the language of literature, the beauty of description and dialogue, and the language of moving images, colors, glances and emotions are two separate mediums. Let's hope that the Academy members will also notice this beauty, now encapsulated not only on the pages of the novel, hanging on museum walls in pictures frozen in time and hummed under one's breath or in thoughts, but taken and transformed into a unique collage of sensory experiences.
That's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.
Bye.